From the Library of Congress in Washington, D.C.
My name is Marie Arana. I'm the book editor of the Washington Post, a charter sponsor of this festival. We're very happy that this festival is here, and it's doing wonderfully, even in the rain. So, I'm especially delighted to be here to introduce our next guest, Bob Schieffer, one of the most prominent broadcast journalists in television history. He is among the few to have covered all four corners of Washington: the White House, the Pentagon, the State Department, and Congress. His near 40-year career with CBS includes 23 years as anchor on the Saturday edition, 25 years as chief Washington correspondent, 17 years as moderator on Face the Nation, and many years as interim anchor of the CBS Evening News. Mr. Schieffer has written 3 books about his life in journalism. They are Face the Nation, my favorite stories from the first 50 years of the award-winning new broadcast. This Just In, What I Couldn't Tell You on TV. And his latest, Bob Schieffer's America. My objective, says Mr. Schieffer in Bob Schieffer's America, has never been to convert someone to my way of thinking, but merely to provoke thought, to explain a complicated subject, or to call attention to a human foible. The greatest compliment to me is not when viewers write to say they agree with my conclusion, but when they say, I really never thought of it that way before. Bob Schieffer has won 6 Emmy Awards and in 2002 was named Broadcaster of the Year by the National Press Foundation. Ladies and gentlemen, please give a warm welcome to a tireless, trusted, dedicated journalist.
Well, wow. This is so great. You know, I just wish my wife could be here. She thinks nobody comes to these things. And I'm not going to tell her it was raining and you couldn't get away. So thank you very much for coming. I just seeing this wonderful crowd, and Dr. Billington from the Library of Congress is here. And Doctor, thank you so much for being a part of this. I mean, wow. I was here in 2003 when I wrote Just In, and it occurred to me, I mean, to just see these thousands of people coming out to talk about books and think about books. It's kind of like a football game or a baseball game, and I just love that. I've always been a voracious reader. I couldn't imagine life without books, so I really appreciate you coming. But, you know, even though I know that it's raining out there, as I look out over this crowd, I want to just tell you about, it reminds me very much of some years back. I was invited down to a little college in Louisiana called Louisiana College. It was a beautiful spring day, and I walked into this auditorium. Every seat in the auditorium was filled. Kids were sitting in the aisle. I looked up in the balcony, and there were kids sitting in every seat up there. It was not air conditioned, and they'd raised the windows, these large windows, down one side of the auditorium, and kids were sitting in the windowsills. And this is true. I looked out this window next to the speaker's podium here, and there was a big tree, and 3 kids had climbed up into this tree and were sitting on a branch looking into the auditorium to hear me speak. And I was really, it just kind of choked me up, and I said, you know, this is such an honor to think that all of these young people would come out on a beautiful spring day to hear me talk. And a kid on the front row said, it's mandatory. So, even though it's raining out there, I'm going to tell you, I really appreciate you all coming out. At least I know nobody made you come down here. When I first came to Washington, the first reporter I met was Helen Thomas of UPI. How many people in this tent know who Helen Thomas is? You see, I am convinced that Helen has a higher recognition than some people who have been president of the United States. I've never been in a group that at least 98% of the people didn't know who she was. And I thought I would just take as my text something that she said once to me. When I first met Helen, and I'll take a little bit before I tell you what it was she said, but when I first met Helen was when I was a rookie reporter in the CBS Bureau. Richard Nixon had just come to office, and in those days, they held church services in the East Room of the White House every Sunday. I mean, I don't know why nobody ever made anything of the, no separation of church and state, but maybe because these things were so social, nobody really thought they were religious events. But at any rate, they would have a visiting minister come in, and they would sing hymns, and members of the White House staff would kind of pay back social invitations by inviting people to come in to these church services at the White House. So Helen was always there working for UPI, and I, being the rookie in the Bureau, was always sent over there to cover this, just to make sure there wasn't any news. If there was any, they would have called Dan Rather, the White House correspondent, and he would have done it on television that night, but there never was any news. But I was just there to make sure that no news happened. Well, one Sunday, the security wasn't nearly as strict in those days as it is now, but for some reason, I guess the Secret Service was looking the other way, and they were having a receiving line where people were going up to shake hands with the president, and Helen said, "Get in the line. We'll go up there and shake hands with the president. We'll ask him some questions." And I said, "Well, we're not supposed to get in that line." "No, get in." I said, "We'll ask some questions." And I said, "Well, I don't have any questions." And she said, I'll ask some questions." I said, "Judy, I'll tell you what to ask." So anyway, we get up there, and there was a story going around that the president was going to bring in some new advisors. Nobody knew where they were coming from. So when I got up to my turn, she said, "Ask him about the advisors." So I shook hands. I said, "How are you, Mr. President?" I said, "Mr. President, about these advisors." I said, "Are these going to be in-house advisors?" He's, "Oh, no," he said, "these will be out-house advisors." And, "Well, you know what I mean." And then he walked off. Because of that, I can say that I have interviewed every president since Nixon. I don't know if very many people would count that as an interview, but I do. And but anyway, what I was going to tell you about Helen was after I became White House correspondent, when President Ford was president, Helen was still at the White House. They brought in Henry Kissinger one day, and he was going to give us a background briefing on something. And the press secretary said, "Now, Dr. Kissinger only has 20 minutes. He does not have 1 minute more. So you must confine your questions to 20 minutes. Well, Kissinger, who is ever the ham, said, "Well, being a college professor, my lectures are usually timed to 40 minutes. I don't know if I can do it in 20 minutes. Helen on the front row said, "Well, just start at the end." And I want to tell you, she has not changed a bit. But I thought what I would do is I would just start at the end today. I thought I'd tell you a little bit about where I was last night. I was in Oxford, Mississippi. Covering the first of the debates, and I've been very honored. I'm going to be the moderator of the third and last debate on October 15th. I basically thought it was a great debate. I thought it was the kind of debate that the American people deserve. I thought we covered a lot of topics, and I really couldn't pick a winner last night. I thought McCain really presented the case for experience. I thought he was much more focused, and I thought he made a much better presentation. Made his case much better than he actually did in his acceptance speech at the Republican convention, and I thought that was basically a pretty good speech. But I also thought that Barack Obama really held his own with McCain. Foreign policy is supposed to be McCain's strong point, but I thought, frankly, that Obama stayed with him all the way. And I think the race is still just as close as it ever was. I mean, one thing for sure, nobody broke away last night. There were no gaffes. I thought it was very serious. Neither one of them told us very much about what they think is going to be done about this financial crisis that we have. But I'm going to have McCain, I beg your pardon, I'm going to have Obama on Face the Nation tomorrow morning. So maybe I can ask him a little more about that. Maybe we'll know a little more about this crisis. They're still meeting, I'm told, up on the Hill. Nancy Pelosi said just a minute ago she thought they were making progress. If they get a deal, it's going to be very interesting to see exactly what the deal is. And I've got to tell you, as a reporter, and I've covered everything. I was a police reporter, newspaper reporter, for a long time before I got into television. I've covered everything from hubcap thieves and then coming to CBS and some complicated things like arms control. I have never been as unsure about what I think the right solution is to this crisis that we're confronting. I do believe that it is a very serious crisis, but somehow we find ourselves in the hands of experts who are going to tell us what we need to do about this, and then we stop and think it's the experts that got us into it. So, this is a tough one. This is a tough one, and I really do not feel that I have the expertise to really have an opinion. I mean, always, when these stories happen, sometimes I've been right, sometimes I've been wrong, but I've always at least had a view on where I thought we ought to go. But I'm very uncharted waters here right now. But I think I think the Congress is going to have to do something. I think this is going to be the major problem that the next president is going to have to confront, along with a variety of other things. To tell you a little bit, and so that's the lead here as far as I'm concerned, is what's going on right now. What a race. I have never in my life, and I've covered every campaign since 1968 when I went to my first convention. I've been involved with everyone since. I cannot recall one that has been like this one. It is just beyond imagining. I mean, it's become almost a cliche to say that it is historic, but every day it's not only historic, we have some new and different surprise. So I'm just proud. I was thinking about retiring last year. They talked me out of doing that. Then I was going to retire next year. My brother says I'm starting to sound like Roger Clemens. I retired and I come back, and he said he just hoped to God I'd stay off the steroids, and I promised him I'm going to do that. But I'm going to keep hanging around for a while. It's just too much fun. Let me just give a little commercial for this book that I've written. It's called Bob Schieffer's America, a modest title. I was on the Daily Show with Jon Stewart this week, and he said, "Wait a minute, America belongs to Sean Hannity. How have you gotten a hold of it?" And but whatever, I didn't actually make the title. Someone else, the editor in New York, did that. This is a book of little essays that I write at the end of Face the Nation every Sunday, and it turned out there were 700 of them. I started writing them the weekend after Richard Nixon died, and I just thought the broadcast needed a little button that day, and so I wrote a very short essay talking about how we can learn from the imperfect as well as the perfect. And I ended it with the words, Richard Nixon left the White House in disgrace, but he left this life with some dignity. And to my absolute surprise, we were overwhelmed with mail, and this is before the email days. So I tried it again a couple of weeks later. Again, we got a lot of reaction, so we just decided to make it a part of the program. I'd done this for 2 or 3 months, and nobody in New York, my bosses, had said a word, and I began to worry, did I really have permission to be doing this? We have very strict rules about, expressing opinion at CBS, and then I thought, well, if I'm not supposed to do it, they'll call me and tell me not to do it. So I just kept on doing it, and several months later, I won a national award from Sigma Delta Chi for commentary, and the phones lit up. All the bosses in New York, this is great. We knew you were going to win a prize. Keep it up. You've probably worked, some of you, at a place like that. But Anyway, I just kept on doing it, and there have been 700 of them since then. We boiled it down to 170 and a half and put them into this book. I say a half because I wrote this ode to grilled cheese sandwiches that I didn't think that was a full commentary. So nearly 171 commentaries. Some of them are about very serious stuff, war and peace, and some of them are about less serious things. Well, actually, maybe they are serious things. On holidays, I generally write something about holidays, and some of my actual favorites are the ones I've written on Mother's Day and Father's Day. For example, this may ring a bell with some of you. Most telephone calls are written are made on Mother's Day. That's the day when more telephone calls than any other day of the year are made. Most collect calls are made on Father's Day, which tells you what dads are supposed to do and what a big part of our job is. The first boy-girl party we had at my house, I have 2 grown daughters, Mom was complimented about how pretty she looked. I was told, Dad, please just act normal. Have any of you ever... Has any father ever told a joke that made a teenager smile, let alone laugh? But you know, at the end, they come back, and you all live happily ever after. But so I have a little advice like that for fathers and how to get along. For mothers, I actually every once in a while on Valentine's Day will write a poem. Say poems on Face the Nation. You know, to paraphrase Mel Brooks, it's good to be the anchor man. So I do get my poems on Face the Nation sometimes, if not anywhere else. At the end of the book, I write a long chapter about some of the things that I think I have learned. I've been a reporter now for 51 years. And I have tried to sum up some of the things that I believe I have learned in that 50 years. And I will just wind this up, and maybe we'll take some questions after this. But basically, here are the things that I think that I've learned over the last half century as a reporter. And that is, number one, that I believe democracy must come from within. It cannot be imposed from without. The second thing, I believe that America can do wondrous things, but it works best when it works with others. The third thing I believe is that we must always remember that where our real strength comes from is not from our weapons, but from our values and our way of life. And I mean that in this way. Hubert Humphrey once said that the 1964 Civil Rights Act was the greatest single most effective foreign policy initiative of the last half of the 20th century. Not because it had anything to do with foreign policy, but because it told the rest of the world who we were and what kind of people we were, and that by having the kind of government we had, where we put as much emphasis on helping the weakest of our society as taking care of those who were more fortunate, that system of government worked. You know, America in the Cold War built the greatest arsenal of weapons ever known to mankind. And those weapons kept the Soviet Union at bay. But what won the Cold War is not the weapons, but when the people on the other side of the Iron Curtain looked across the Iron Curtain and saw that the people in the West had a better way of life. They didn't want more rockets. They didn't want more guns. They wanted television sets. They wanted washing machines. They wanted schools where their children could be educated. And they wanted a way of life where their children's lives would be better than theirs. And they realized that their system of government was not giving them what the people on the other side of the Iron Curtain were getting, and so the Iron Curtain came down. It came down because there are no secrets on the other side of the tracks in the age of television. They saw so much of what was happening across the Iron Curtain on television. When they realized that, that's when the wall came down. That's when the Berlin Wall came down. And I think one of the proudest moments in American history was when that Berlin Wall came down. As the people were knocking it down, they sang the anthem of our civil rights movement, "We Shall Overcome," and they played it to the tunes that were coming out of American boom boxes. I think that is something that all of us can be very proud of. Finally, I will just say this, and then we'll have a few questions. As I think about this country, I think about one of my favorite historians, Will Durant, and what he said. Will Durant said that Rome wasn't built in a day, but neither did it fall in a week. It took more than 300 years for the Roman Empire to fall. That is longer than any democracy in the history of the world has existed. So as wondrous as America is, our message to our children, I think, must be we must nurture this system of government we have. And what we must also do is practice what we preach. We cannot tell the world how wonderful our way of government is. We cannot tell them how effective it is if we somehow don't practice what we preach. We don't need, in my view, secret prisons, for one thing. We don't need torture as part of our national policy. Our message to the rest of the world, and this is where our security is enhanced, our message to the rest of the world must be, that's what the other guys do. That's not the way we do it. When I was a very young reporter, I'd just gotten out of the Air Force. I'd never heard a shot fired in anger. And I was sent to Oxford, Mississippi in 1962 to cover what turned out to be my biggest story up until that point. And that was the enrollment of James Meredith at the University of Mississippi. It was a terrible night and a terrible week. Federal marshals came onto that campus. People came to the campus, many of them not even students. They caused a riot. 2 people were killed, many were injured. Federal marshals were firing tear gas into a crowd that at one point had gone so far as to find a bulldozer that was on a construction site nearby and had started it up and started it into the middle of this crowd. Snipers were on the roof of the dormitories firing down into the group of reporters where I happened to be in the middle of that campus, and that is how 2 journalists were killed. I never, and I went to Vietnam after that, but as far as terror, that night I experienced terror unlike anything I had experienced before that night or since. All because this mob was trying to prevent an African American student from enrolling at the University of Ole Miss. Last night, I was in Oxford, Mississippi, watching the whole university come together, black students and white students, to do whatever they could to facilitate the debate between the first African American who had received a nomination of his party, the Democrats, Barack Obama, debate against a true American hero, John McCain. Think about that. We didn't just see a debate last night. We saw a remarkable moment in the history of this country. We have a long way to go. We have a long way to go, but in less than my lifetime, we have come a very long way. Thank you very much.
Mr. Schieffer. Mr. Schieffer.
Thank you all.
You let it happen before.
I have lost track of my time, so when we're out of time, somebody tell me. Okay, go ahead.
Practicing what we preach in presidential debates, there's 3 candidates for president coming from the U.S. Congress, and I don't know whether I'm going to vote for John McCain, Barack Obama, or Bob Barr, and I sure would like it to see the 3 of them on the stage together. And why is it that the media goes along with the two major parties, keeping out
The
other
minor
candidates?
party candidates. As I understand it, the debate commission has had this rule, and they've had it for a long, long time, that you must reach a certain point in national polls in order to qualify.
15%, but the major media don't cover it.
Well, it's something that can be argued, but I think Bob Barr is not going to be elected president, and he may be a good person, and I'm not here to argue that. But
because the experts say so.
He has had a chance to express his point of view, but I think this is really serious business, and I think it's good to have the 2 top people there together going head to head. My opinion. Thank you for your question. Next.
This is not actually a question, but earlier in this tent, we heard from Daniel Shore. And he was asked after his speech, who is the greatest living journalist that he knows that would measure up to someone he said was his role model, Edward R. Murrow. And he looked around and he said, is Bob Schieffer in the tent?
Well, that is very nice. I'm not sure that would be me. But it's awfully nice. It's awfully nice. And, you know, the interesting thing about Dan Shore, Dan is now past 90 years old, and I'm not quite sure how old he is. He looks exactly the same as he looked to me the day I walked into the Bureau in 1968 when I came to work for CBS. He's just a remarkable person, and while I don't deserve that, I greatly appreciate hearing it. Thank you very much. Yes.
Can you just comment on the idea of our country promoting the idea of democracy around the world and the fact that people who live here in the district are not equally represented in Congress?
I hear you. I think it's, and I'm not sure what I could add to that, but I hear what you're saying, and who knows, maybe this is going to change somewhere down the line, but right now, I don't see it changing, quite frankly. Next.
On that side?
Oh, I'm sorry. Where? Oh, there you are. I didn't realize you were there. I'm sorry. You know, I'm blind as a bat. Let me put on my, I'll put on my glasses here. Go ahead.
Can you comment on the Sarah Palin phenomenon, and particularly how Gwen Ifill keeps from doing something different in the debate because it's such an unusual situation?
Well, it's an amazing situation when you stop and think about it. I mean, picking Sarah Palin was John McCain, the fighter pilot. You know, there are 2 kind of people in the Navy. There are the admirals who drive those aircraft carriers, and they have a lot of people to help them. And then there are those people who fly those airplanes off the aircraft carrier, and they're individuals. And they're the guys who are willing to risk it all and put it up on the line. I think John McCain felt he had to have a game changer, and he picked Sarah Palin. I think he was trying to reach out and get independent women. Now, I don't know if that's going to succeed. What he did do is he galvanized the right side of the Republican Party, the social conservatives and the evangelicals, who are a big part of the Republican base. There's no question that this group within the Republican Party likes John McCain today a lot more than they ever did. In fact, some of them just hated him. Remember, you know, he called Jerry Falwell in 2000 an agent of intolerance. But how far her appeal goes beyond that group, I don't know. If their party, what we saw at their convention is any sign, John McCain has the Republican base unified beyond anything that he could have imagined in his wildest dreams. But here's the other part. You know, last week Wall Street threw a little game changer into the thing, which I think trumped that. I don't know where this goes from here, but I'll tell you this. The idea that somehow the American people do not have the right to know as much as we can find out about her, I just don't know where that comes from. I mean, and I think she's going to have to get out, do more interviews, hold more news conferences, and I don't think that they can just sort of keep her cooped up back there without that in itself becoming an issue. And she is, I will say this in all fairness, she has begun to do interviews. She did a big interview with Katie Couric last week. A lot of people found it very, very enlightening. It would be the way I would put that.
Is it hard for a reporter not to change his or her game plan, and in this case, her game plan in the interview, when you have such an unusual situation?
Well, what makes this so unusual, this woman has a compelling life story. You know, if you were writing a movie, it would be hard to invent a character more colorful and more compelling than she is. But she is virtually unknown in the lower 48 states. So I think, number one, the idea that reporters would try to find out more about her, I think if for no other reason, just for that reason. But the American people deserve to know who these people are, all of them, all four of them. And I hope that the press will treat her exactly like they're treating Joe Biden and exactly like they're treating Barack Obama and John McCain. Gwen Ifill is a very good reporter, and I expect she'll, you know, my idea is you ask the people the obvious questions, and then once you get those answered, then you go on to something else. And I think that's what's going to happen here. I think we're going to find out a lot more about her. Okay. I think we're running into overtime here. Listen, you all couldn't have been nicer. Thank you so much for coming. It's wonderful to be here. Thank you.
This has been a presentation of the Library of Congress. Visit us at loc.gov.